Hi, everybody. This is Jack Alwell with another money episode. Today, we have Eric Landblom here. He is a retired Marine and founder of Leadership Developed, a company dedicated to helping individuals and organizations develop leadership skills and resilience. With over 20 years of military experience, Eric has unique perspective on contingency planning, and that is why I have asked him to be here today. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Jack.
So I first heard Eric speak at FinCon a couple weeks ago, and very interesting discussion on contingency planning. But before we get into the contingency planning, Eric, I like asking everyone, what was your relationship with money growing up?
Um, it was watching dad go to work and mom paying the bills, with the checkbook on the couch and just paying attention to, or being inquisitive of what, they were doing and asking questions, why we pay for this or why we pay for that. And then what did they, learning that what you spend your money on was what you valued type idea. So when I had money and we would go on these, I grew up in North Dakota. Sorry, I gotta put some context. I grew up in North Dakota. North Dakota, you feel like the world is what you saw on television. So when you get a chance to leave North Dakota, go California, go to Disneyland, and your grandparents give you $40 and you're like thinking you're rich at age 8, my parents were like, okay, you have this money, to spend at Disneyland, get things that you will value that will have longer influence. Because what was happening was you got that money and you start looking here, 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 and there, and you want to buy these things because it's the world's brand new and all this is available to you. But I think that when they taught me, hey, what will you value longer with that money, taught me really how I became an adult with money, because it was important to be able to, like, when you're a teenager, you're buying tapes or CDs. Mm-hmm. And I learned to evaluate, do I really want to buy this thing? Am I going to get long-term value out of it? And that was my learning relationship with money.
Awesome. So walk us through, how did you discover or kind of fall in love with contingency planning? How did that become your thing?
That became a thing of necessity. Being a pilot, being a combat pilot in the Marine Corps, you learn that life can change on you just like that. One minute, I was a lead troubleshoot pilot in my squadron, and I was out one morning, and it was a beautiful morning. Sun's rising, the aircraft's just performing beautifully. We thought we're going to have this, easy day, and then all of a sudden, utility system blows a line, fluids hitting the hot engines, and then everything catches on fire. Thankfully, because of contingency planning, being a pilot, we were able to land the aircraft safely, keep everyone alive, set up a protective barrier since we were in bad guy territory, and be able to build a recovery plan. That's what most of your time as a pilot is doing, is creating this what if situations and how would you handle it. And it's not just, if something breaks, this happens. You have moral questions. We ask the moral questions a lot, and then we discuss it and going, what is, because there's no right answer up until something really happens. So that's how being a contingency planning became my thing. Second was when I was 37, I lost my first wife to cancer. And during that time when she was going through it, we worked through the risk mitigation, the wills, the life, power attorneys, all those things that made my life easier after she left. And then while you're in your misery, you have this, I call it the crate of crap, but it's all the paperwork that prepared you for having people help you navigate the systems. And by having that prepared, it was easy for me to be in tears and my sorrow, my grief, and hand it to somebody, and they were able to find what they needed and provide a solution for me. So those are the two areas of contingency planning that helped me really pay attention to it and help others understand it so they can have, we just had COVID and how that's caught a lot of small businesses off guard, even personal friends, and helping them navigate those things. So that's how contingency planning became a personal effort for my part in our business now.
Wow. Sorry to hear about your wife, but
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's get to the details of, so when you're thinking of a contingency planning framework, like what actually is involved?
So first, I use these abstract steps. And the steps are, identify the hazards, prioritize the hazards, um, create a plan for them, implement the plan, and then review or view the changes of the environment around you. They're very abstract, but by having that system allows you then to use the tools that we can talk about later to navigate how you set yourself up. But having those 5 steps will help anybody pay attention or have a framework of working through the what ifs. And going backwards in steps helps too, to understand if I do this, I should do this next.
So when someone's trying to come up with the risks they should be worried about, what types of things, the identify component of that process?
So on a personal level, we're always thinking about, family, home. I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we're on the baseline, we're talking about home and shelter, clothing, food, and protection, right? So we think in those terms, and then we work to the next level up. But we have to answer. You can't get everything done in one shot. It's so overwhelming. So as you're chipping away at it, you start at the baseline of the Maslow's pure or hierarchy of needs. What's the most important thing? So we think of, home. Okay, so I have homeowners insurance. Okay, is it good homeowner insurance? I start getting into that. Loss of my, wife. It could be, a death, or it could be a divorce. How do we, handle that up front? We have a business, so we have to figure out what's the succession plan. Does the business live on past either of us? Does it dissolve? We have an agreement that the business will dissolve before anything else dissolves. These are just things we think of and work through. And as you're working from the baseline to, security and protection, to love and belonging, to all the way to growth, you're thinking about, okay, all the way to growth. I'm going to start another master's degree. So what if my GI Bill doesn't cover it? What's my contingency plan to finish it out, to pay for it, things like that. And that's where I create a bucket of money to back myself up.
Okay. Can you walk us through? So at the FinCon presentation, you presented a risk matrix. Can you walk us through what that is and how you use that?
Okay, so risk matrix is something I learned from statistical analysis and decision making. And what it is if you look down the right-hand side of this column, we're going to list out everything. We're going to list out every possible thing that we can dream of that would happen. And then above, we're going to have these categories. We're going to have, what's the impact, overall impact. Now, impact is a result of influence, not unlike effect. Effect is a result of cause. So that's why we're going to talk about impact. We're going to talk about the likelihood of it. Then we're going to talk about the short-term effects. And then we're going to talk about the long-term effects. By understanding what those 4 things are, and then we can go down each line. Let's say we're going to go across this matrix, and we're going to have a drop-down menu. It's going to have high, level, or high, medium, and low. And they'll have a weighted system. Just like the columns above, the impact, the likelihood, the short-term effects, and long-term effects, those are weighted as well. I weighted the impacts as 10s. I weighted the likelihoods as 7s. And then the short-term and long-term effects, I weighted those with 4s. And that's just experience of working with this matrix. Now, the drop-down matrix with the high, level, low has its own score. A high is a 7, a medium is a 4, and a low is a 1. Take that back, 7, 3, 1. So what that allows us to do then is be able to have something that's high really stand out compared to everything else. So let's take loss of a job. The impact's high because of the influence. The likelihood of it, I like to think it's a medium. With this current market right now, some businesses are good about taking care of their people. We just don't know right now. So it's a medium. The short-term effects is high because it is, that income that you needed to pay the next set of bills if you're in that position. And then the long-term effect is a medium or a high. Depends how your confidence level about getting back in that job market, knowing what you can offer back in there. And by the time you score all that out, it gives you a final score. So when it compares to others, it's prioritizing. The highest score wins. Now, this but tools alone does not work. You have to have experience, use your experience. We get jaded as we get older, but it's funny at the same time, we talk through, experience and looking at the matrix and going, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? Or, oh, I didn't expect that. And so then it helps you realign your planning process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So if for the Excel junkies, you're basically doing like a sum product, like you're awaiting those four factors, and then whatever you're ranking each risk, high, medium, or low. Okay.
Yeah.
Like when we thinking about like high impact, low frequency versus
Mhm.
high frequency, low impact, how did you kind of get to those? Can you describe some of like the process of getting to those weightings?
Well, so the weightings for us, so this was a collaborative effort. It was
Mhm.
between my wife and our good friend who's he's a CFO, and he does, this type of risk analysis when he evaluates taking over companies. And so we were working through we actually spent 3 weeks of going, what's important here? What do we feel for the customer, for the person we want to help, is important to them? And so there had to be some experience. We had to bring in our experiences and our knowledge of what was out there, of what we knew could happen. And that's how we kind of came up with that. I'm going to tell you that building these, contingency planning does not happen in a vacuum. You have to ask people, hey, what did you deal with? Because not everyone experiences everything at the same time, but eventually somebody experiences something so we need to share that information. We need to, hey, what's the best practices out there? And that's what we hope to do with contingency planning.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of like practicing it or putting it into implementation, I guess it's important to stay humble and seek out people that have more knowledge and are experts in what can go wrong.
Right. Well, like I encourage my peers and my Marines, when I lost my wife Winnie to cancer, it's like I wanted them to have conversations with me. I wanted them to not go through what I went through, because I wish I had somebody, or I wish I reached out to somebody I didn't know about this. And it would have, I don't know how it would have changed things, maybe other than I would probably would have not chased it as easily. But right now I found the need for what I went through to allow my peers, my fellow pilots, or the Marines I was in charge of, to have these conversations and to understand the importance of, I'm going to show you my soft side. I mean, I hate to say this, but
Uh-huh.
for a tough Marine, we have to show that, Chewy center to allow people to trust us with what we're talking about. And it's very important to be able to have that trust and having that, hey, this is what happened to me. This is how I planned it. What are your plans? Don't use what I use because that was a different time, a different place, but consider it as an option. What are your other options?
Mm-hmm. In terms of putting it into practice and keeping up with it, because it is an iterative process, how often do you recommend people kind of revisiting this and checking their contingency planning?
Yeah, we practice one afternoon a month. Actually, we put it on our calendar where we sit with this binder and we're going through, are these plans still relative to the time and space that we're in? For us, it's been helpful because we're using a product that another FinConner had asked us to look through, and we're using it and giving critiques and all that other stuff. But we're finding it useful for us to be able to say, okay, if something happens to both of us at the same time, our next of kin, our trusted relatives know that they pull out that binder and they can go through the steps and find everything. I mean, insurance policies, bank accounts. My wife, Wendy, she used to hide her jewelry in these weird places. And I wish I knew where they were sometimes because I didn't have accountability. So we made it accountable, where these things are, who gets what. And, it has to be a frequency that makes sense. Once a quarter is probably barest minimum. I would do this, but once a month, one afternoon a month with your, or one evening if you're working, with your family, is very important, because it's fresh in your head. It helps you realize, oh, we missed something, or hey, I was talking to so and so and they had this idea, and that allows everything to keep it a living, breathing document that protects you and your family. Because I know what my parents are saying and I know what my grandmas were saying, and it's like, it's not my problem, you guys deal with it. Well, please consider that we're going to be fighting over, we're going to have unnecessary fights because we are interpreting what's in your head, not what's on paper. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see people maybe have the biggest blind spots in their contingency planning?
The biggest blind spots, they find that they're superhuman, that nothing will happen to them. They believe, we do it at home too. It's like, it's just weird that we drive to work, we drive home, we drive to the grocery store, things like that. Things can happen that aren't in our control. We could be the best, safest driver ever, but there's still that risk of something happening. And it's those moments where I've seen fellow Marines that had, who lost their wife while we're deployed because of a car accident in the grocery store. And he's like, how the hell did this happen? I didn't. So that's a big blind spot, thinking that everyday life, and I don't want everyone to be worried about each other, on the common stuff, but I want you to be understanding that being prepared for that, that's what the big blind spot is that people don't understand is it happens like that. Your life changes like that. And it could be anything that's not in your control, but it's still a cause from somebody exterior control that, there's just no way to mitigate it.
Yeah. I like this discussion. A lot of times in personal finance, we're often talking about offense, and I do think the defense is important, and that's what you're getting at. So Eric, as we're winding down, I like asking everyone, what is the best and worst personal finance advice you've either heard or received?
The best personal finance advice. For the best, it was always something my wife Elise, AJ Money Coach, she says to her clients is, tell me what you value and I'll show you what you value from your bank account. And that amplifies with me looking back about, how I dealt with money on my own after losing my first wife, how I actually made smart decisions about, what I valued. Spending just, decreased, savings went sky high. Learning that with her was very important. So, it was just our journey together. Is probably the best money advice I had was what you spend your money on reflects what you value. We value travel. So we'll spend lots of money going to a foreign country just to live in an apartment for a month to be, hey, this is pretending that we live there, Those are the things we value. Now, the worst financial advice I ever got was annuities. When you're a young Marine, so I was enlisted before I was an officer. I had to live in the barracks, and there would always be this one guy who comes around the barracks trying to sell you on, an annuity, because he uses all the right terms. You're first, you pay yourself first. All the great advice, but at the end, the product was an annuity that probably gave us 1% growth while he's pocketing the rest of the growth. And so that was the first time every time I hear the word annuity, ever since I was 23 years old, I just cringe, because it just scares me that people really make a lot of money off this. And then we see the results.
Mm-hmm. A lot of commissions. Well, Eric, it's been great having you on. Where can people go to learn more about you or get in touch with you?
Okay. So I'm on YouTube, usually under Leadership Developed. Also, our website is JL Endeavors. So Jackson Landblom Endeavors.com. And you'll find in there a selection of our different services, mine being the leadership and management, AJ's money coaches on there, and then our accounting and bookkeeping services.
Awesome.
And then if you want to email me directly, Eric Landblom.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.